Escape rooms are absolutely everywhere these days. They've totally blown up as this super fun, team-based challenge. I bet a lot of you have even tried one, right? That feeling of solving puzzles, racing against the clock, and then that thrill of hearing the final lock click open. It's a huge deal all over the world. So it was only a matter of time before educators saw all that excitement and thought, hey, how can we get that energy into the classroom? And the idea is just brilliant, right? Harness that same buzz for learning. But that raises a really important question. Are these educational versions actually powerful learning tools, or are they just a fun game?
Okay, let's get real for a second, because here's the problem. Research shows that for all the hype, the results for actual learning are often, well, pretty disappointing. A lot of these classroom games are basically just copycats of the ones you'd find at the mall, and they nail the fun part, but kind of drop the ball on the whole education thing. There's this huge gap between engagement and actual knowledge gain.
So, the big question is, how do we fix that? How do we go beyond just a fun activity and build something that's both super engaging and educationally rock solid? Turns out it takes a really thoughtful, research-backed approach. And we're going to break down the blueprint for how to do just that. First, we'll talk about a solid framework for learning. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of making your puzzles actually match your teaching goals. After that, we'll uncover a really surprising secret to what creates immersion. And finally, we'll cover the most important step of all, the debrief, which is what makes the learning really stick. All right, the very first thing we need to do is make a big mental shift. We've got to stop thinking about entertainment first and start building everything around the education. And you can see right here just how different they are. In a regular escape room, the goal is just to have fun. But in an educational one, the goal has to be learning. And that one simple change, it changes everything. The teaching style shifts from just working together to collaborative learning. And you're not running one team at a time. You've got a whole class doing it at once. The game is in a classroom, not some custom-built set. It's a whole different ball game. So to deal with that, you can't just wing it and throw some puzzles in a box. You need a structure, a real framework that guides students through the whole journey, from the minute they step out of the real world, into the game, and all the way back again. And the research gives us this awesome three-part framework. First up is the transition in phase. That's all about getting students into the game mindset. The second phase, and this is maybe the most important one, is making sure the game and the learning are perfectly lined up. And then finally, you've got the transfer out phase, which is all about connecting what they did in the game back to real-world knowledge. We're going to start with that crucial middle part, alignment. This next part is, I would argue, the most important principle of this entire process. If you get this wrong, the whole reason you're doing an escape room in the first place just kind of falls apart. It's a concept called pedagogical alignment. And it sounds fancy, but it's actually super simple. To win the game, you have to learn the material. There are no shortcuts. The goal of the game and the goal of the lesson become the exact same thing. Let me give you a perfect example of what I mean. Weak alignment is when you just solve some random math problem to get a code for a lock. Sure, it's math, but it has nothing to do with the story. Strong alignment, on the other hand, is when using your knowledge is the action. So in a medical escape room, you don't just answer a biology question. You use what you know to diagnose a patient correctly and literally save their life. See the difference? The learning is completely baked into the story. Okay, so our puzzles are perfectly aligned. Awesome. Now we need to get students totally lost in the experience. We need immersion. But what really creates it? Well, it might just surprise you. Just think about it for a second. If I asked you to design an immersive educational game, what's the first thing you think of? I bet you're thinking about a really detailed story, right? Or maybe getting authentic props and costumes, some cool high-tech gadgets, or maybe even a fancy sound system. Those are the things we usually think of when we hear the word immersive. And look, all of that stuff can definitely help. But the research found that the single biggest factor that directly boosts knowledge gain wasn't any of those things. It was something way simpler and way more focused. It was this, the physical escape box itself. This thing, the central object that the whole team has to gather around, turned out to be the most powerful tool for immersion. Why? Because it physically brings the students together, it focuses their attention on the task and on each other, and it cuts out all the other distractions in the classroom. And this quote from a student just says it all, doesn't it? The box is tangible, it's mysterious, it's engaging. It gives everyone a single focal point for working together and just draws them in way more effectively than a complicated story or some background music ever could. It's a huge lesson. Educational immersion is more about focus than it is about flair.
Okay, so we've aligned our puzzles, we've created real immersion, the students escaped. Mission accomplished, right? Nope. The experience is not over. In fact, when it comes to the learning, the most important part is just about to start.
And this is a truly mind-blowing statistic. Studies show that only about 40% of educational escape rooms actually have a debriefing session at the end. Think about that. That means most of these games just end. They're missing the single best opportunity to make sure the learning actually sinks in and connects back to the real world.
You know, a good debrief isn't just asking, so, was that fun? It's a structured process. You have to start by letting students just decompress from that high-energy game. Then, you go through the puzzles one by one and explicitly connect them to the learning goals. This is your chance to clear up any mistakes people made under pressure. And then, the crucial final step, you pull the knowledge out of the game's story and talk about how it applies to bigger, real-world ideas.
Honestly, this part is non-negotiable. Without a debrief, what you have is a really memorable activity. But with a debrief, you have a powerful learning event. It's the bridge that carries the knowledge out of the game and into the student's long-term memory. It's what makes it stick.
So let's wrap this all up. The blueprint for a killer educational escape room really boils down to 3 key things. First, align. Make sure winning the game means learning the content. Second, immerse. Create focus with tangible hands-on puzzles. And third, debrief. You have to build that bridge back to the real world to make the learning last. And you know, this framework isn't just for escape rooms. It's a model for any kind of active, hands-on learning. It's all about being intentional with your design. So the final question is for you. How will you use these ideas, alignment, immersion, and debriefing, to turn a simple game into a truly transformative learning experience?